Chapter 25. Hank Greenberg. When Jackie Robinson first broke in with the Brooklyn Dodgers in 1947, a barrage of racial insults were directed at him from fans in the stands from opposing players. One team even threatened to go on strike rather than play against Brooklyn if Robinson were in the lineup. But there were encouraging signs as well. In a game against Pittsburgh early in the season, Jackie and Pittsburgh first baseman Hank Greenberg accidentally collided in a close play at first base. No words were exchanged. A couple of minutes later, though, Greenberg said, "I'm sorry, I should have asked you if you were hurt." "Thanks," said Jackie. "I'm okay." "Don't let them get to you," said Greenberg. "You're doing fine. Keep it up." Asked about the incident by reporters after the game, he said, "Hank Greenberg has class, stands out all over him." Newspaper reports, 1947. Lots of people were surprised when they heard I'd signed up to play professional baseball. Most people were considered me that a good ball player. A few friends thought I had some talent, but I was generally thought of as a big, awkward, gawky kid who was always stumbling over his own 2 feet. When I was 13, I was only 6'3", and by the time I was 16, I weighed close to 200 pounds. I had flat feet, really flat, so I couldn't run very fast, and I wasn't too well coordinated either, or to put it mildly. Under the circumstances, the chances of me getting to the big leagues didn't look too good. Most people who'd seen in me play didn't think I'd make it. For instance, in 1928, my last year in high school, when I was 17, I was chosen the best high school first baseman in the New York metropolitan area. Based on that, my dad asked a friend of his to see if he could get me into the Polo Grounds. Dad was a textile business and inspecting the shrinking cloth, and one of his customers was close to some people in the New York Giants organization. The Giants played all afternoon in games then, of course, and at 10 in the morning, and then the substitutes would take batting practice. They needed people in the outfield to shag balls, to catch fly balls and grounders, throw them back to the infield. That's all I wanted an opportunity to do. We figured that it might be a foot in the door. But word came back through my dad's friend that the Giants didn't want me to shag balls. They said they'd seen me play for James Monroe High School and didn't think I had any future. Back then, I always thought of myself as a Giants fan. The first major league game I ever had been to was at the Polo Grounds. My dad took me to a doubleheader between the Giants and the Phillies when I was about 13. I still remember that Frankie Frisch, the Fordham Flash, a New York boy, got 7 hits for the Giants in the doubleheader. Also, John McGraw was the Giants manager, had always made it a big thing of looking for a Jewish ball player. He figured a Jewish player would be good, they'd get attraction in New York. Well, here I was, the city's best high school first baseman in the bargain, and they wouldn't even let me into the Polo Grounds to shag balls at 10 in the morning. Looking back, I have mixed feelings about that rejection by the Giants. It wouldn't have cost them anything to let me shag balls. On the other hand, I've got to admit they were in the majority. Those days, most people simply didn't take baseball talents very seriously. What they didn't count on, though, was my determination. I wasn't a natural ball player like other players like Babe Ruth or Willie Mays. In fact, as a teenager, I was better at basketball and soccer than I was at baseball. I played center on the James Monroe basketball team, and I was a fullback on the soccer team. Believe it or not, I was there when we won city championships in all 3 sports. I also played it on the football team my senior year, but I didn't like it. When I had some free time, I was on the swimming team and threw the shot put. The wonder of it is that I ever graduated, because when I look back on high school, I can't figure out when I ever had any time to study. I used to get up at 5 in the morning to cram for exams. Actually, basketball was my first love, and if pro basketball had existed back then, I probably would have chosen it over baseball, but I love baseball too and was determined to make it good at it. We lived in East Tremont section of the Bronx, and the Cortana Park North, which is another name for East 174th Street, just across the street from Cortana Park. and only a block from the park's baseball field. That's where I spent most of my time practicing. Someone once said I didn't play ball when I was a kid. I worked at it. And I guess they were right. I played pepper by the hour, for example, to improve my fielding. Guys would hit or bunt the ball to me, and I'd catch it. Over and over again, I'd count how many balls I'd fielded without an error, and then after I missed one, I had started counting all over again. To improve hitting, I'd get friends and kids hanging around the park to pitch to me and to shag balls for me. Usually there would be 3 or 4 of them, one pitching and 2 or 3 shagging in the outfield. Sometimes I'd have a couple of infielders too. There was no backstop in Crotona Park, which meant I had to hit the ball because it got past me. I was the one who had to chase it. The idea was to hit fly balls to the guys shagging and get a fly ball to each of them often enough so they didn't get bored and quit. But you couldn't hit the ball too far away from them, so they had to do too much running because they'd quit, not because they were bored, but because they were tired. You also had to be careful not to hit the ball hard straight back to the pitcher, because if he got hit with the batted ball, he'd quit and go home too. I was able to hit fly balls within 10 or 15 feet of where I wanted in the outfield, or hit ground balls within a few feet of where I was aiming for the infield, and whenever a bad pitch came in, I could successfully throw my bat at it and stop it from getting by me. You do this all day long, every day, day after day. Sooner or later, you're bound to get pretty good. I know I spent a lot of time at Crotona Park because I wanted to make myself a better ball player. But in all frankness, I suspect it was also more complicated than that. I'm no psychologist, but I think one reason I spent so much time there was related to the fact I was 6'3", and 13 years old. I was awkward, clumsy, bad case of adolescent accent, and fell out of place. At school, I'd squeeze behind one of those tiny desks, and I'd have to go to the blackboard, or it would be the event end of the day. All the kids would titter because I'd tower way above the teacher. Everybody always teased me. How's the air up there? I heard that a dozen times a day at home. If company was at the house, they'd be astounded. My God, look at how much he's grown. He's grown 2 feet in a week. I began to think I was a freak. I felt that everybody was laughing at me. It was embarrassing. I was always slouching around, more or less hiding, never standing up straight. Sports was my escape from all that. Many of the very things where liabilities socially were assessed in sports. I felt more comfortable with athletics, and I think that I had a lot to do with why I spent so much of my time at the Crotona Park. Any event, whatever the motivation, it paid off. Paul Critchell, who was a Yankees scout, came to one of our high school games in 1928 to see one of our pitchers. He didn't care much for the pitcher, but I had a good day at bat, and at first base, he got interested in me. Graduated from James Monroe in February 1929 and because my folks wanted me to, I enrolled at New York University starting in September. Mom and Dad had immigrated here from Romania around the turn of the century. They were only kids then. They had to go to work and they were very young. They wanted us to have the college education they'd never had. Meanwhile, I kept on with my usual routines in Crotona Park, and I also played on a few sandlot and semi-pro teams while waiting for college to start in the fall. Wherever I played, there would be Mr. Critchell watching me and taking notes. That summer, 1929, Mr. Critchell invited me to go with him to a game at Yankee Stadium. It was only the second time I'd ever been to a Major League game. The first time it had been with my dad, and when he took me 5 years earlier to watch Frankie Frisch get those 7 hits for the Giants against the Phillies. We sat in the first row box right next to the Yankees dugout when Lou Gehrig came out to took his place on the on-deck circle in the bottom half of the first inning. Critchell leaned over and whispered to me, "He's all washed up. In a few years, you'll be the Yankees' first baseman." I heard what Critchell was saying, but it made no impression on me because I was so awed at the sight of Lou Gehrig kneeling on the on-deck circle, only a few feet away. His shoulders were a yard wide and his legs looked like mighty oak trees. I had never seen such sheer brute strength. "No way, I'm going to sign with this team," I said to myself, "not with him playing first base." The Yankees made me a very good offer, $10,000 bonus for signing. That was a fortune in those days, but I'd made up my mind that I'd be a fool to sign with them. And as you all are well aware, Gehrig played first base every single day for the New York Yankees until 1939. There was a long line of first basemen owned by the Yankees organization who spent their whole careers in the minors, waiting for him to leave. I'm just glad I escaped being one of them. The Detroit Tigers was also interesting me, as well as the Washington Senators and the Pittsburgh Pirates. I liked the Detroit scout better than the others. His name was Gene Dubuque, and he'd been a pitcher with Detroit before becoming a scout. He'd gone to college at Holy Cross in Notre Dame and was a very nice person, soft-spoken, low-key, in my opinion, a cut above the others. He understood how much my parents wanted me to go to college, and he took that into account. The Tigers offered me a $9,000 bonus, $1,000 less than the Yankees, but it was drawn up with my mother and father in mind. I was to receive $3,000 immediately on signing, with the other $6,000 when I reported to the ball club after college. That pleased my parents, so I signed with the Tigers. I entered New York's University that September as planned, but after one semester I got bored. I wanted to play ball. So I finally convinced my folks to let me try it. So in the spring of 1930, at the age of 19, I quit school and went out to spring training with the Detroit Tigers. 3 years, the Tigers farmed me out to the minor leagues. In 1930, I played with Raleigh in the Piedmont League, and in 1931, I was in Evansville in the 3I League. Then 1932, it all came together. I hit 39 home runs and drove in 131 runs in Beaumont in the Texas League. Del Baker, who's our manager at Beaumont, and Schoolboy Rowe and Pete Fox were on the team. We won the Texas League pennant. I was voted the league's MVP. In many of the small southern towns where I played during those years, I think I was the first Jew they'd ever seen. They seemed surprised I didn't have horns and a long beard. I encountered some hostility, but I'd say much more curiosity than hostility. In the minor leagues, I did what I had always done. Got out to the ballpark early, whether it was a game day or an off day. Practiced hitting, fielding. It wasn't hard to talk someone of the other guys into doing the same thing. What else was there to do than most of those minor league towns anyway besides play ball? We were all young in our teens, so early 20s maybe. Hardly any of us married. So we'd hustle out to the ballpark at 10 in the morning and have fun while waiting for the games to start. I did the same thing when I was in the major leagues too. For that matter, I got out to the ballpark early for extra batting practice, often for some extra fielding practice. I didn't only at home in Detroit, but also on the road everywhere except in New York. The Yankees wouldn't let me into Yankee Stadium early to take extra batting practice, but no other club objected. Boston, I remember climbing up on the top of the left field wall in Fenway Park to retrieve baseballs. I hit it up there. For a while, I had a problem at Shibe Park in Philadelphia. After about a half hour of batting practice one day, the groundskeeper came over and we had to leave. As usual, I had a whole crew with me, a pitcher, several guys to shock balls in the outfield. Old 2. We were getting our gear together, preparing to leave, when an elderly gentleman none of us had recognized, sitting about 20 rows up in the grandstand, called to me. I went up to see what he wanted and said, "I very much admire what you are doing, young man. You tell that groundskeeper to assist you in every way possible. Tell him that those are John Shibe's instructions, and if he doesn't take it, send him right up here to see me." Needless to say, I never had any trouble at Shibe Park afterwards. After that fine year in Beaumont, 1932 MVP all, I counted on being Detroit's first baseman in 1933. However, the first thing Tigers manager Bucky Harris greeted me with when he saw me in spring training was, "Kid, I'm glad to see you. You're going to be a third baseman." Who, me? I never played third base in my life. Never even had a finger glove on my hand. Detroit had a smooth fielding first baseman named Harry Davis, who they bought for $75,000. Big money in those days on Bucky Harris's recommendation. There were a lot of flashy fielding left-handed first basemen. No power around then, like Lou Blue, Joe Judge, Joe O'Kuhl, and Harry Davis was a carbon copy of that type, except he wasn't quite as good a hitter. But he had a pretty fair year in 1932, hit around 270. The Tigers felt they needed a third baseman more than a first baseman. "I don't know how to play third base," I told Harris. I played third base since first base since grade school." "Oh, there's nothing to it," Bucky Harris says. "You get out there and practice and you'll do a great job." So they put me on third base in spring training. Got myself a fielder's glove and worked like a dog. We started north to open up the 33 season and played the usual exhibition games along the way. One of them, I remember, there was a man on first and somebody hit a ground ball to me at third. I fired it to second base so hard trying for a double play that the ball was out in right field before Charlie Gehrig could get to the bag. A couple days later, I booted one by cutting in front of Billy Rogel, who was at shortstop. When he had the play particularly made, I really made a mess of it. Next day, I wasn't in the lineup. No one said a word to me. The following day, I'm not in the lineup again. Furthermore, I'm not listed to take batting practice with regulars. Still, nobody said a thing to me. However, I was starting to get the message. After a couple more days of this, I came to the park one morning and took the third baseman's glove and buried it away in the back of my locker. I found my old first baseman's mitt, put it on my hand, walked out onto the field. Harry Davis was the regular first baseman, but I stood nearby in short right field or in foul territory. Whenever he left, I took over at first base and practiced ground balls. When the time came for pregame infield practice, I waited until he was through, and then I'd go out and take his place. No one said a word to me, and I didn't say anything to anyone. It was pretty clear from my actions where I thought I was playing, but nobody seemed to care, one way or another. Season opened with me still sitting on the bench. After the game ended one day, I couldn't contain myself any longer. I showered, dressed, marched straight up to the front office and asked the switchboard operator if I could see Mr. Naveen, the owner. She didn't know who I was. I told her, "I'm Hank Greenberg. I'm on the team." Mr. Naveen said to come into his office, and as I walked in, I was trembling. "Mr. Naveen," I blurted out, I can't sit on the bench anymore. I want to play. I'd rather play in Detroit, but if Detroit doesn't want me, then let me go someplace where they do want me." "Now, young man," he said, "I appreciate how you feel. It's very understandable, but why don't you sit on the bench for a while and observe what's happening on the field? You can learn a great deal, by watching these major league pitchers." "That's a lie." "But Mr. Naveen," I said, I'll get fat just sitting on the bench. Here I was as skinny as a rail." "Have patience, young man," he said. "You'll be playing before you know it. Don't worry." So I sat there on the bench for about 2 more weeks. wasn't very happy about it. Never forget what happened next. One day we were just about ready to go out and start a ball game. The phone rang in the manager's cubby hole in the locker room. Bucky Harris answered it, and then he came out and went over to his big slate board with the lineup on it and erased Harry Davis's name and put mine in its place. I played that day. It was against a left-handed pitcher. Next time I played, it was about a week later against another left-hander. Third time I got in the lineup, I hit a home run and a double. The next thing you knew, I was in there every day. Played about 120 games that season. I didn't hit many home runs, but I drove in about 90 runs. It was in the middle of the Great Depression in 1933. Most everyone was broke. We used to sit around the hotel lobby waiting for someone to drop a newspaper. No kidding, we'd sit in the lobby until someone got up and left their newspaper, and then 5 guys would make it a dash for it. No one and ever thought of going to the newsstand to buy a paper for 3 cents, which is what they cost then. And tipping in those days, a nickel was considered a pretty good tip. We hardly ever tipped more than that. We used to tease Schoolboy Rowe for leaving a 2-cent tip one time at dinner. That's right, 2-cent tip. We never let him forget it. My salary was $3,300 in 1933. I asked for $5,500 for 1934, figuring I had a pretty good year. They only wanted me for $5,000, though. And that $500 difference led to my first holdout. Mr. Naveen wrote me a letter in which he had something like, "I've had many better ball players than you on my team." Ty Cobb once thought he was a bit bigger than the game, and I told him if he didn't want to play, he could stay home. Same thing and goes for you. If you don't want to play ball with us, you can stay home. I was scared. But I didn't budge. A couple months passed, and in late February, I got a phone call from Detroit. It was Mr. Naveen again. "Listen, young man," he says, "if you don't want to play ball for us, you can just hang up your uniform and stay out of baseball." And he went on and on like this for like 10 minutes. Then he said, "However, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll give you a $5,000 guaranteed, but if we finish 1 or 2, 3, I'll give you a $500 bonus." 1, 2, 3, what a joke. We hadn't finished higher than 5th in 10 years, but it's only a week before spring training began, and I'm ready to jump at anything provided I can save face. So I said, "Thank you very much, Mr. Naveen. I really appreciate that. I'll be there for spring training on March 1st, sir." Funny thing, we've been on a 5th place ball club in 1933, lost about as many games as we won. Over the winter, however, Bucky Harris was released, and Mr. Naveen bought Mickey Cochrane, who is from Philadelphia, and made him a playing manager. He also got Goose Goslin from Washington. As a result of these and other changes, we won the American League pennant in 1934. First pennant Detroit won in 25 years, and I actually got that $500 bonus. That was an outstanding team in 1934 and 35 Tigers. We won the pennant both years and the 1935 World Series. The infield with Charlie Gehrig at second, Billy Rogel at short, and Marv Owen at third was superb. Both defensively and offensively, 1934, that infield alone batted in a record of 462 runs, 139 for me. Gehrig had 127, 100 for Rogel, and 96 for Owen. The next year, we batted in over 400 runs again, including 170 for me, over 100 for Gehrig, or 2. In the outfield, Goose Goslin batted in about 100 runs each year, and Joe Wyatt, Pete Fox, and G. Walker did their share too. With Schoolboy Rowe, Tommy Bridges, Eldon Ocker, Firpo Marbury, and General Crowder pitching, Mickey Cochrane catching, I think it's one of the all-time great teams. We had 4 future Hall of Famers on that team. By the way, myself, Gehrig, Goose, and Cochrane. Charlie Gehrig was possibly the best second baseman who ever lived, marvelous player, and Mickey Cochrane was maybe the best all-around catcher. Mickey, he was the spark that ignited us. He was an inspirational leader. We needed somebody to take charge and show us how to win. That's what Mickey did. He'd been on 3 pennant winners with the Philadelphia A's in 1929, 1930, and 1931. Winning was a way of life with him. There was an intangible something about him, a winning spirit that was really infectious. We would have won the pennant in 1936 too, I think, if I hadn't been hurt that year. I'd been voted in the American League's MVP in 1935 when I hit .328, 36 homers, and led the league in 170 RBIs. 1936, though, season had hardly begun, and Jake Powell ran into me at first base and broke my left wrist. I was out for the whole year, and we wound up in second place. Following year, Mickey got beaned, and we were never the same after that tragedy. Mickey was hit on the head by a pitched ball in May of 1937, and he never played again. 1937, the year after I was out with the broken wrist, the Tigers sent me a $1 a year contract, and I signed it. I had to go through spring training and prove I was healthy before they replaced it, and with the regular contract. Imagine any ball player saying a $1 a year contract today. Turned out that 1937 was the best year I ever had. Most people would say 1938 was my best year. I hit 58 home runs. I don't think so. I picked 1937 when I hit .337 and 40 home runs and batted in 183 runs. I have always believed the most important aspect of hitting is driving in runs. RBIs are most important, then batting average, more important than home runs. More important than anything. That's what wins ball games. Driving in runs across the plate. Charlie Gehrig used to bat ahead of me, and if we had a man on first base and Charlie was up, I'd yell, "Get him to third, Charlie. Just get him to third. He'll get him in." That was my goal, get the man in. It got to be a standing joke. Once Charlie said to me, "I suppose if I hit a double with the man on first, you'd probably trip him if he tried to go past third base." 1930, Hack Wilson had set the Major League record for RBIs with 190. A year later, in 1931, Lou Gehrig had the American League record, 184. I'm third on the all-time list with 183 in 1937. I was much more... Excuse me 1 minute. Fixing something. I was much more disappointed when I failed to break Gehrig's RBI record in 1937 than when I was when I didn't break Babe Ruth's home run record in 1938. RBIs in my were in my obsession, not home runs. Of course, it's true that in 1938 I almost broke Babe Ruth's record of 60 home runs in a season. I was too short with 58. That's because Hank Greenberg, 58 home runs. Naturally, I was disappointed. I already had 58, and there were 5 games left still to play. So it looked like I had a good shot at the record, but in one of the 5 remaining games, I was walked 4 times, and in one game, in another, Bob Feller set a new strikeout record by striking out 18 men in one game, including me twice. It was one thing after another, and then the final game of the season was called an account of darkness in the 6th inning, and that was that. Still, people will have to fix in their minds that the reason I didn't break Babe Ruth's record was because I was Jewish. The ball players did everything they could to stop me. That's pure baloney. The fact of the matter is quite the opposite. So far as I could tell, the players were mostly rooting for me aside from the pitchers. I remember one game, Bill Dickey was catcher for the Yankees. He was even telling me what was coming up. The reason I didn't hit 60 or 61 homers is because I ran out of gas. It had nothing to do with my religion and the fact that I was Jewish. Anyway, it really doesn't matter too much as far as I'm concerned. Roger Maris, Hank Aaron broke Ruth's home run records, but nobody pays much attention, and rightfully so. Babe Ruth was the ultimate home run hitter of his time and of all time. He was the greatest player in the history of the game, and whether someone breaks this home run record or that at one can't change the fundamental truth. Speaking of Bob Feller, by the way, the first time I ever batted against him in 1937, he was only 18 years old then. He had such blinding speed and was so wild that everybody was afraid to go up to bat, including me. He had a very deceptive motion. You never knew where the ball was coming from or where it was going, and neither did he. I saw him throw a ball behind Billy Rogel when Rogel was batting left-handed. Rogel almost dropped his bat and started out to the mound. Hang on a minute. Gives you an idea of how wild Feller was. A right-handed pitcher throwing behind a left-handed batter. Later, he developed a terrific curve, and then he was just unhittable. You couldn't hit the curve, so you'd wait for the fastball, but that would be by you before you knew what happened. Talking about Bob Feller reminds me of Joe DiMaggio, probably because they both came up at the same time. Everybody remembers Willie Mays' catch off of Vic Wertz in 1954, in the 1954 World Series, but very few people remember an even greater catch Joe DiMaggio made off of me in 1939. I hit a tremendous line drive one day in Yankee Stadium and went at least 450 feet to the deepest part of center field. Joe turned and raced toward the bleachers with his back to the plate, still running full speed without turning around or looking back. He stuck his glove up, and the ball landed right in it. Mays had time to turn his head and to see where the ball was coming, but Joe never even had time to turn. If he had turned his head he would have lost it. So he just stuck up his glove. Sheer instinct. There are great ball players nowadays, of course, but I played in an era of super great ball players, especially first basemen. Just think of the competition I had at first base in the American League. Al Trotsky, Zeke Igbonura, Jimmy Fox, Lou Gehrig, and Rudy York. Most people have forgotten about Hal Trotsky, a marvelous first baseman for the Cleveland Indians all through the 30s. The man batted in 162 runs one year. Zeke Bonura of the Chicago White Sox was another good hitter with power. Jimmy Fox may be the greatest right-handed power hitter of all time. When I came up, I used to talk about hitting with Jimmy whenever I had a chance. He was a friendly, warm person, always is very helpful to everybody. And, of course, Lou Gehrig, the best of all. He wasn't very friendly, though. I was in the league a year and a half before he said a word to me. I remember the first time he spoke to me. It was in the middle of the 1934 season, after we passed the Yankees and went to first place. I got a single and standing on first base. He turned to me and said sort of gruffly, "Aren't you going to say hello?" "Hello, Lou," I said. That's all. Couldn't think of anything else to say. I think I was a little scared of him. From then on, it was just, hello, and that was it. We never chatted. Rudy York was special because he was on my team, and he was also a close friend. Rudy was a great human being. In a sense, you might say that he took my job away from me. Rudy joined the Tigers in 1937 and hit 35 home runs. Next year, he hit 33 and drove in 127 runs. And then he had another great year in 1939. What a hitter. Rudy's bat was too powerful to keep him out of the lineup, but the problem was where to play him. They tried to hit him at third base in the outfield as a catcher, but at each position he was losing as many games defensively as he was winning with his bat. Well, in January 1940, Jack Zeller, who had recently been made general manager of the Tigers, asked me to take a $5,000 cut in salary. Mr. Nevine had died in 1935, and Walter Briggs became the Tigers' owner. He delegated a lot of more authority than Mr. Nevine had. Jack Zeller had the nerve to argue that I had a poor season in 1939 because I didn't hit 58 home runs again. I made $40,000 in 1939 when he wanted to cut me and eat $35,000. No way, Jack, I said. I'm not taking any salary cut. I had a pretty good last year. You can't expect me to hit 58 home runs every single year. I should get at least $40,000 again, the same as last year. Well, he said, I'll tell you what I'll do. If you go out to the outfield and play left field and let Rudy York play first base, then I'll keep your salary at $40,000. That $5,000 salary cut was just a ploy to get me out. He had moved to the outfield so they could put Rudy on at first base. First base was probably his best position, but in fact he eventually developed into a fine defensive first baseman. But as far as I was concerned, it was no deal. What are you talking about? I said, I'm not going to the outfield. If Rudy can beat me out at first base, then the job is his. No one gave me the job. Let him earn it like I did, just like I did. Come on, Hank, Zeller said. You know that with Rudy on first and you in the outfield, we'll be a better team than last year. I thought it over a few days, and then went back to him. To begin with, I said, I want the same salary as last year, $40,000. But if you want me to go to the outfield, I'll have to buy a fielder's glove and go down to spring training and work my tail off and give you all spring to make up your mind what you want to do. I won't even put on a first baseman's mitt. I'll practice in the outfield as hard as I can. Then on opening day, if you want me to stay in the outfield, you give me a $10,000 bonus. I'm taking all the risk in this experiment. I have the most to lose, so I deserve the same compensation for it. That's what happened. Opening day, I was in left field. I walked up to the front office, and Jack Zeller gave me a check for $10,000. And I could have kissed him, because playing the outfield was sheer joy. I loved it out there. It was a lot easier than playing first base as far as I was concerned. For one thing, I didn't have to take as much riding from the opposing players. Detroit at first base is next to the visiting team's bench, so I was always fielding my position close to the opposing team's yelling. I didn't have to take as much riding from the fans either. I guess I had rabbit ears because I often let what I heard bother me. In the outfield, I had a strong and accurate arm, and I knew where to throw the ball. And I also knew the characteristics of the hitters. Having been in the league for a long time, a lot of outfielding is known where to play the hitters. If you do that properly, pretty soon the ball is hit to you instead of you chasing it after it. It all worked out just fine because we won the American League Pennant 1940. First time since 1935, I hit .340, about 40 home runs, and drove in 150 runs. Rudy York also hit .300 with about 30 homers, and he drove in 130 runs. I was also voted the league's MVP again. I think the only time someone has won the MVP award at two different positions. Del Baker was our manager that year. Mickey Cochran had been let go in 1938. Baker, remember, had been the manager with Beaumont in the Texas League back in 1932. Dell's claim to fame was that he was an expert signing stealer. I mean, he could stand on the third base coaching lines and read a catcher's sign or pick up on a pitcher's mannerisms and let you know in advance what kind of pitch was coming, fastball or curve or what have you. I loved that. I was a great hitter, or the greatest hitter in the world. And I knew what kind of pitch was coming up. Baker chattered all the time while coaching at third base, and if he had said, "All right," when I was up to bat, it meant the next pitch was going to be a fastball. If he said, "Come on," it meant a curve, like, "All right, Hank, you can do it." It would tell me a fastball was on its way. "Come on, Hank, you can do it," meant a curve was coming. Some guys didn't want to know the signs. They preferred to figure out the pitch by themselves. Gehrig would never take the signs, nor Gosselin, but Rudy York and I thrived on them, which is one reason we murdered the ball in 1940. The only pitcher where I wouldn't take signs from was Bob Feller. With his speed, I was afraid of risking the chance of a mistake. Baker told me a curve was coming up. He was wrong. If it was really a fastball, I could be in big trouble. Feller had such a great curve that it would look like it was going to hit you, but then it'd break over the plate at the last second. If I hung in there expecting to break, but it was really a fastball and didn't break. Couldn't get killed. I could get killed. Rudy and I were having such a terrific year in 1940, Del Baker started taking credit for our hitting. At one point, it seemed as though if he was called the pitch correctly and I hit a home run, he thought it was his home run. Baker was a real good sign stealer, but no question about it, but there's a big difference between knowing what's coming and hitting it. Getting the signs doesn't guarantee that you'll hit the ball. In fact, we had the signs of the Cincinnati Reds in the World Series that year. We still lost it. Ernie Lombardi, the regular Cincinnati catcher, was hurt, so Jimmy Wilson did most of their catching. We could read his signs from our bench, and we flashed them to our batters, but it didn't help. Bobo Newsom pitched and won 2 games for us, but then he lost the 7th game to Paul Duringer by a score of 2-1. World War II came around in the next year, and that was the end of my baseball career for about 4.5 years. Hugh McCauley was the first baseman when I was the second Major League ball player to go into the armed forces. I was drafted into the Army on May 7th, 1941, and didn't get back into baseball until July 1945. I was 30 years old at the peak of my career. When I left, I was 34. And 34 years old and a bit shop-worn when I got back. I spent most of the overseas with India and China and the Air Force. I hardly played any ball at all during that time. One game I do remember, though, when I was stationed in Fort Custer near Battle Creek, Michigan. Shortly after I was inducted, a sergeant friend of mine told me he had a brother who was in the state prison at Jackson, about 50 miles away. He said that the prison warden was a great baseball fan, and it would do his brother a world of good if I could be talked into playing with the Fort Custer team when they played their annual game at the prison. I said, okay, I'll do it. I'll play on the Fort Custer team for the one and only game. Him only. We traveled to the prison in the Army bus, and when we got there, it turned out that the Army team didn't have a baseball uniform that would fit me. The prison did, though, so I put on the prison uniform. Then I said, well, as long as I got this uniform on, I might as well play with you guys. So I played for the prison team. found that it was customary for the prisoners to root for the visiting team and ride the hell out of their fellow prisoners. And ride the umpire, too. But who was also a prisoner? "You crook, you thief," they'd yell at him. But now I'm playing first base for a prison team. And suddenly they're all rooting for me for their own team. I hit a double, 2 singles, and a home run over the wall. The first time the ball had ever been hit over the prison yard. And of course, all the prisoners in the grandstand yelled, "I'll get it, I'll get it." I rejoined the Tigers on July 1st, 1945. I had the 2 biggest thrills of my whole career that season. It was my first day back, July 1st. 50,000 people came to the ballpark to welcome me home. And I hit a home run in that day and helped the Tigers win the game. I was playing from memory. I hardly had a ball on my hands since I left 1941. And after I hit that home run, they gave me an unbelievable standing ovation. The second throw was on the last day of the season when I hit a home run over with the bases loaded in the 9th inning to win the pennant. There were 2 men on base and 1 out. The opposing pitcher, Nelson Potter, walked Doc Kramer to load the bases. And get to me, I hit the second pitch on a line drive into left field bleachers. I guess that was my biggest thrill of all. What was going through my mind? I was rounding the bases. Is that only a few months before I was in India, wondering if the war would ever end. And now the war actually was over, and not only that, but I just hit a pennant-winning grand slam home run. I wasn't sure whether I was awake or dreaming. After the season ended, though, I got one of the biggest shocks of my life. January 1947, I heard on the radio that I'd been sold to the Pittsburgh Pirates. I wasn't even sold, really. Given away, it would describe it better. I was waived out of the American League and picked up by the Pittsburgh Pirates for practically nothing. Evidently, nobody else felt they could afford me my $75,000 salary. I couldn't believe it. Detroit was my team. I identified 100% with the Tigers. I'd been in the Detroit organization for 17 years. Only a little over a year ago, I hit that pennant-winning home run on the last day of the season. And here I was being dumped without even a courtesy of a phone call. I did get a telegram, though. Your contract has been assigned to the Pittsburgh in the National League. That's all it said. Never understood it, still don't to this day. I've had a sour attitude toward Mr. Briggs ever since. He's the man who must have been responsible. I still remember Mrs. Briggs kissing me goodbye when I went into the Army in 1941. But now the Army was over. It's an old story. What have you done for me lately? In my case, it was just lead the league in home runs and runs batted in. I was so shocked when I heard I quit baseball. I quit baseball, simply quit. I told the press I was retiring, and that was that. John Galbraith, Frank McKinney, and Bing Crosby had just bought the Pittsburgh Pirates. They announced they had acquired Hank Greenberg. The American League home runs and RBIs is in a week. Their advance sale picked up in $200,000. So they were very eager for me to play. When I said I was retiring, they were quite unhappy. I mean, I would be too. Mr. Galbraith came to New York and phoned me to have lunch with him. I said, "Mr. Galbraith, I'm not going to play anymore. I have announced my retirement." I meant it. I mean it. "I don't want you to talk you into playing," he said. "I just want to have lunch with you." So we had lunch, and while we were eating, he said, "Tell me what your objections are to playing in Pittsburgh." "I don't have my heart in it," I said. "I played all my career with Detroit, and that's home to me. Not to mention things like the fences in your ballpark." Pittsburgh has had a big ballpark then. I'm used to a park that has 340 feet down the left field line. Yours is 380 feet. I don't want to disappoint everybody." "Don't worry about that," he said. "And how far is it in Detroit?" 340. "Well, we'll make in Pittsburgh 342. We'll bring in the fences in, so it'll be 340. "That's not so important," I said. "There are a lot of things. For instance, I can't ride those trains anymore. The berths are too small. Every time I go win them, I get a crick in my back." "You don't have to go by train," he said. "You can go by plane." "I can't stand a roommate anymore," I said. "At my age, I don't want to have a deal with roommates." "Fine," he said. "Don't worry about roommates. We'll give you a suite by yourself on the road." "Well," I said, "if I ever play for anybody, they give me my outright release at the end of the season. I would never want to hear on the radio again that I've been traded or sold." "Okay," he said. "We'll give you your outright release at the end of the season." "Everything I mentioned," he said. "Don't worry, we'll take care of it. We'll work it out." So finally I said, "Well, you wouldn't pay me enough anyhow. We'll pay you whatever you want." "What did you get last year?" $75,000. "What do you want for this year?" "I'd say 100,000. "Fine," he said. "You got it." When he got through offering me all this, what could I do? He talked me into playing, so I went into play it one more year. I doubt if I really earned my salary on the field that year, even though I hit 25 home runs and drove in 75 runs. I brought in a lot of money at the gate. However, I think I earned my pay by training my own successor, so to speak. I worked a lot with Ralph Kiner, who was still a baby then, and helped him become the great home run hitter he eventually became. I still feel as close to Ralph as if he were my own son. Ralph had a natural home run swing. All he needed was somebody to teach him the value of hard work and self-discipline. Early in the morning and on off days, every chance we got, we worked on hitting. "Let me ask you something," I asked him. "In a 150-game season, let's say you go to bat 4 times a game. That's 600 times at bat. Let's say you get 2 decent swings each time at bat. That's 1,200 swings. If you stand here at home plate and you make the pitcher throw strikes, don't you think here at home plate you'll make don't you think that with 1,200 swings you hit 35 balls out of the park?" "Sure," he said. "Well," I said, "that's all there is to it. You know you're going to get 1,200 swings. You know the secret to making the pitcher throw strikes. If you learn the strike zone, you're automatically going to have 35 home runs a season. It's as simple as that." He learned the strike zone, and instead of hitting 35 homers, he hit over 50 twice. Led the league in 7 straight years, except for Babe Ruth. No one has ever hit as many home runs per time at bat as Ralph Kiner. At the time of the 47th season, the Pirates kept their word and gave me my release. Then I really did quit playing. The passage of time and changes in the game have pushed me way down in terms of numbers of home runs hit. But when I retired in 1947, my 331 lifetime home runs were 5th on the all-time list. The only ones who had hit more home runs than me were Babe Ruth, Jimmy Fox, Mel Ott, and Lou Gehrig, in that order. You have to realize that I lost 4.5 seasons due to World War II, and another year because of that broken wrist in 1936. Well, I actually played it only 9.5 years during that time. I hit 331 home runs and drove in 1,276 runs. Nearly one in a game and only one in baseball history who ever did as well as driving runs across the plate is Lou Gehrig. After I finished playing, I had a whole second career on the management level. I met Belvique at the 1947 World Series, found a kindred spirit, and joined them in the Cleveland Indians front office in 1948. In my opinion, Bill Veecken is the smartest and most innovative baseball executive of all time, except for Branch Rickey. He doesn't have any competition. Veek converted me. I was a ball player, you see, and the game was everything. What happened aside from the game was irrelevant to me. Bill taught me the baseball was more than just balls and strikes, hits and errors. You have to get people into the ballpark, and to do that, you have to attract them with a good line, as well as a good team. I finally recognized that baseball is part of entertainment and show business. I think Veek's genius of drawing more than 2.5 million fans in Cleveland in 1948, a town that typically drew less than 1 million, and was a big accomplishment. In its own way, is Ted Williams hitting .406. First, I was a farm director and then general manager at Cleveland, and afterwards vice president of the White Sox. Then Veek took over that club. I was part owner of each franchise as well. I guess one of the few who went from the sandlots through the players' ranks to the front office and eventually an ownership position. When Veek became ill and had to sell the White Sox in 1961, I had an opportunity to increase my stock ownership and acquire a majority interest in the club. After a lot of thought, I finally decided against it. What tipped the scales against buying was the other owners. I recognized then that there were a lot of prejudice against me. I've had my life savings tied up in the club. I realized that if I ever needed any help, I sure wouldn't get it from fellow owners. It would be close his ranks against me. Strangely enough, that was the first time anti-Semitism really affected me advisorily in baseball. As a player, I often had fans and opposing players taunting me, calling me names. For at least 10 years, I hardly played in the ballpark, and there wasn't some loudmouth fan popping off with the anti-Jewish remarks. In the minors, the Piedmont League, in the Texas League, and for many years in the majors too, my religion was seen as an appropriate topic for ridicule. However, I think that helped me more than it hurt. I was a very sensitive, fired-up ball player, and when they got on me that way, it brought out the best in me. I played all the harder. My mind, by the way, players belonged in different categories than fans. It was considered fair game to try to probe for a guy's weak spot so you can catch his attention and destroy his concentration. Joe McCarthy used to have 2 third-string managers on the Yankee bench. We called them bench jockeys, whose main job was to ride the opposition and try to get their goat. When opposing bench jockeys taunted me, was it really anti-Semitism or just a psychological ploy to distract me? Probably some of both, but in my opinion, it was mostly a psychological ploy. After all, Al Simmons heard similar insults about his Polish history, and Joe DiMaggio about his Italian heritage. Babe Ruth was called a big baboon and much worse. Zeke Bonura, the banana nose. In all honesty, I couldn't until then, and I can't now, single out the insults and aimed at me as any different from all the others. I think they were all the same kind of thing. You want to talk about real bigotry? That is what Jackie Robinson had to contend with in 1947. Teammates asked to be traded rather than play with him. Opponents threatening him to strike rather than play against him. In many places, he couldn't eat, sleep with the rest of the team. I never encountered anything like that. I was with the Pittsburgh Pirates in the National League that year, so I saw it close up. Brooklyn was leading the league, and we were in last place. They were beating our brains out, and here's some of our guys having a good time yelling insults at Jackie. I had to put up with a little more than a mild hazing compared than what he went through. Sometimes it would get pretty bad too for me. Of course, the Chicago Cubs were especially vicious. In 1935, a World Series, they got on me from the first pitch and with some really rough stuff. George Moriarty, who was the umpire behind home plate, bothered me so much he went over to quiet them down. Or bothered him a lot, yeah. They told old Moriarty to mind his own business. They weren't getting on him, they were trying to get on me. So I broke my wrist in the second game of the series. I couldn't play anymore, so that ended that. They had a rough crew, but we had the last laugh and won the World Series. Realize now, more than I used to, how important a part I played in the lives of the generation of Jewish kids who grew up in the 30s. I never thought about it then, but in recent years, men and I often tell me how much I meant to them when they were growing up. It's almost the first thing a lot of them say to me. Still surprises me to hear it, but I think I'm finally starting to believe it. They all remember that I didn't play on Yom Kippur, the Jewish holiday. They remember it as every year, but in fact the situation arose only once in 1934. Both Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur came in September of the year, and since we were in the thick of the pennant race, the first for Detroit in many years, it became a national issue whether or not I should play on those days. The press made a big thing out of it. The question was put before Detroit's leading rabbi, Rabbi Leo Franklin. He consulted the Talmud, a basic source for Jewish morality, and announced that I could play on Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, because that was a happy occasion on which Jews used to play ball all in the streets long ago. However, I could not play on Yom Kippur, the day of atonement, because that day should be spent in prayer. So I played on Rosh Hashanah, and believe it or not, I hit 2 home runs off Boston Dusty's road. We beat the Red Sox 2-1 with my second homer winning the game in the 10th inning. Just like in the movies, right? Edgar A. Guest, whose poems used to be nationally syndicated, wrote a poem all about it, which he called, Speaking of Greenberg. I think I still have a copy around here someplace. It's a strange thing. When I was playing, I used to resent and being singled out as a Jewish ball player. I wanted to be known as a great ball player. Period. I'm not sure why or when I changed, because I'm still not a particularly religious person. Lately, though, I find myself wanting to remain remembered as not only as a great ball player, but even more as a great Jewish ball player. Probably Bill Veek's fault, right? After all, he's the one who started me thinking maybe there are other things in life besides balls and strikes. Maybe in good old Crotona Park. I never would have believed a word of it. Speaking of Greenberg, by Edgar A. Guest. The Irish didn't like it when they heard of Greenberg's fame, for they thought of a good first baseman possesses an Irish name, and the Murphys and Mulrooneys said they never dreamed they'd see a Jewish boy from Bronxville out there where Casey used to be. In the early days of April, not a Dugan tipped in his hat. Our prayer to see a double when Hank Greenberg came to bat. In July, the Irish wondered where he'd ever learn to play. He makes me think of Casey, old man Murphy dared to say. And with 57 doubles with the score of homers made, the respect they had for Greensburg was being openly displayed. But on Jewish New Year, when Hank Greenberg came to bat, made 2 home runs off pitcher Rhodes, they cheered like a mad for that. Came Yom Kippur, holy feast day worldwide over to the Jew, and Hank Greenberg, to his teaching in the old tradition true, spent the day among his people. He didn't come to play, Said Murphy to Mulrooney, "We shall lose this game today. We shall miss him in the infield and shall miss him at the bat. But he's true to religion, and I honor him for that."